Assemble. Podcasters, assemble.
Good evening, 003. The following is for your ears only and is classified above top secret by Her Majesty's Secret Service. Our contact with the We Can Make This Work, probably, podcast network intercepted an encrypted audio message regarding Podcasters Assemble, a hype rewatch podcast. For this season, the podcast network is looking to recruit field operatives from around the world to reminisce about the Bond movies in a countdown to the latest film in the franchise, No Time to Die. Your primary objective is to infiltrate Podcasters Assemble by recording and uploading your submissions at probablywork.com, utilizing a two-way communications device with a built-in microphone, the latest from Q-Branch. For a full mission report, go to probablywork.com. We're all counting on you, 003.
This is Toroidal Power from the best animated shows ever so far.
This is Megan from Significant Otter Co.
Hi, my name is Bill. I'm from the Tarviran podcast.
Eric Slater here from Epic Fails of History.
Hi, this is Justin Aki, graphic designer and one half of Significant Otter Co.
And today I'm talking about the first James Bond.
And we're here to talk about the very first Bond film.
And these are my thoughts on Dr. No.
Dr. No.
Dr. No.
Although Dr. No is the first Bond movie, it's actually based on the sixth book in Ian Fleming's series.
For Dr. No, it was my first time watching it.
You know, I don't remember the first time I saw Dr. No.
Now, I can't say if this is my first Bond film.
I'm relatively new. All the James Bonds. I'm very familiar with the Pierce Brosnan ones, but haven't really watched any of the older ones.
I can't even say Sean Connery is my favourite Bond. As I mentioned in previous episodes, Timothy Dalton happens to be my favourite Bond, which I know is very unpopular, as he made two movies, but they're both very, very good movies.
My family... we just kind of grew up with the Bond films around, especially around Thanksgiving and Christmas. There was always TV marathons of the Bond movies going. But the first time I remember deliberately watching it was when I actually got a Christmas gift of just all the Bond movies. It was crazy. It was like the greatest gift ever. It was the whole box set of all the James Bond movies, or I think it was actually 3 separate box sets. But it was the whole franchise, and I sat down and watched through them all in order, like really closely paying attention to them.
And yeah, the very first film is Dr. No. And I remember sitting down as a young kid watching the TV. I'd be sitting with my mum or dad and the Bond films would just come on. This was definitely one of the first Bonds that I'd ever seen. And I remember just being absolutely kind of gripped by the whole thing. Like, what is this? What are spies? What's going on? What is this man doing? Why is he putting his life in danger? I think that was one of the main things I used to think. It's like, why is he bothering? But no, it's just a great little flick, and I've got such fond memories of this movie from when I was a kid.
And what was interesting to me watching in that capacity is that I'd seen a lot of Bond movies before, and especially a lot of Tomorrow Never Dies was actually the one I'd seen the most of. I'll explain more about that when we get to it. But watching Dr. No made me realize that it was simultaneously had a lot of foundational elements for the whole franchise, and was also missing some really key things.
I want to state flat out, this is not a James Bond movie. This is a spy thriller movie from the time period. It doesn't have any of the trappings of a typical Bond movie from later in the series.
My favorite part was realizing that the quippy one-liners were something that were original even in the very first movie.
So right away you can tell this is a proto-Bond movie. It's before the formula is really set in place.
Right off the bat, this movie doesn't open with the traditional cold action opening of a James Bond movie, and then the traditional theme song where you've got some pop star of some sort singing the name of the movie.
There really isn't a cold open in this one. It kind of just jumps right into it.
And also, you can tell this is the first Bond film because it kind of starts a bit of a strange way.
Now, normally a typical Bond movie would begin after the cold open. You'd get a song where the lyrics are inspired by the title.
I really like this opening. It's really engaging right off the bat, but it's weird how it differs from what we expect from a Bond movie.
You get this colorful sequence that's very reminiscent of a lot of Saul Bass's work. Lots of circle designs, and it's all cued to the classic James Bond theme. Although this title sequence might not be very impressive by today's standards, you can definitely see a lot of the early elements that have since visually become synonymous with the spy movie genre.
Instead, it just goes right into this musical opening that's just kind of, the Bond music we all know and love, with similar flashy backgrounds and stuff that we would see in later music openings.
We get this Three Blind Mice song.
But then it transitions into Three Blind Mice, which is just weird, and it takes us right from that musical interlude into the movie with Three Blind Mice, where these three guys who are pretending to be blind go up and just straight up murder a dude.
Which, it kind of makes sense, because you get the, it turns out you've got these three men assassins walking around Jamaica pretending to be blind. They'll just walk along, they'll get away with absolute murder, apparently, if you pretend to be blind in Jamaica.
I forgot the Three Blind Mice were in this movie. I always get it confused with Thunderball that way, being that both movies are based on the islands. But yeah, it's a long bit. 3 assassins basically walk half the island to kill one guy. That's a commitment. How many other assassin work is there in Jamaica, though? Do they pretend to be blind people and fly to other places and kill people?
You absolutely have to hand it to Sean Connery for igniting the gigantic success that this franchise became.
One of the things that I do think is really firmly established in this is kind of the character of Bond. So it's almost like the character just shows up on screen fully formed, but the world and the tropes that go with that character are still being developed. But one of the things that really shows right away how developed this character is when he lands in the Caribbean. He gets off his plane and immediately meets a driver. And he calls up the consulate that he's supposed to be going to and has a little chat with them. And he's like, "Oh, by the way, did you send a driver for me?" And they're like, "No, I understood you didn't want a big greeting. Didn't want to make a big to-do." And he's like, "Yeah, that's what I thought." So Bond's like, "All right, this is a trap." And he just hops in the dude's car and goes with him. He's like, "Whatever, I can deal with this trap. It's cool."
He immediately embodies the character.
But definitely, my number 2 Bond is Sean Connery.
With his ever-present charm, witty one-liners, action chops, and a cool-headed confidence.
I think he's kind of the most iconic. When you think of Bond, it's just kind of, that's what you see in your head. I know there's very much a Connery or Moore camp, but I kind of felt like Roger Moore was a lot more camp, I suppose. I just kind of felt like Sean Connery was a bit more cool, you know what I mean?
I mean, even in his introduction and the way he delivers that famous line, "The name's Bond, James Bond."
I'm sure you could have replaced Bond with Jack Lord, who actually played Felix Leiter in this movie, and went on to be on Hawaii Five-0. Or even Cary Grant, who filmed North by Northwest 3 years before the filming of this movie began.
This might not be the best Bond movie, but there's a lot of great firsts.
James Bond's introduction in this movie is him playing cards, then we get him meeting Moneypenny, we get him meeting with M, so you get a lot of those important elements of the character right off the bat.
So, the door opens, Sean Connery leans in, tosses his hat, flies across the room, lands perfectly on the hat stand. I really like to know how many takes that took. Answers on a postcard, please. I like the idea of them just doing that, filming it over and over and over again. And then even like the first time he lands it, everyone laughs. And then they have to do the take again.
I will say this version of Bond is kind of a weak private eye type, not a superhero. It's always assumed that he works for or with the government, but it's shown better with his brains than he is as a hard killer person.
Now, he's really flirting with Miss Moneypenny in this scene, but she's giving as good as she can get. She's got this man wrapped around her finger, This is kind of, it's 1960s, it feels a little bit sexist on one hand, but she's definitely giving as good as she can get.
And he gets his ass kicked a few times, drinks were drugged, but his spycraft is pretty on point. The fingerprint thing on the briefcase, the hair on the closet door, setting traps. It's one of the only true spy movies in the series.
And yes, this is the scene with M, and he's giving Bond some jip. M's definitely been around the block a bit here.
Even M in this movie states that Bond spent 6 months in hospital because of a screw-up he had in the previous mission.
You've got the first gadget, sort of.
And we don't really get any gadgets in this one. Don't have any Q.
In a weird way, Bond's silencer is kind of a gadget in the movie.
Instead, the closest we get is a member of MI6 coming in and inspecting Bond's gun and saying, oh yeah, this gun, we warned you about this. It's nice and light in a lady's handbag. And then they give him a new gun. And that's kind of his gadget for this movie, is that he gets a new gun. And it's not like plot relevant. Like you would think that there is going to be some point later on in the movie where this gun doesn't fire quite the way he's used to or something. No, he just Bond getting a new gun.
And this is where he gives also Bond his famous Walther PPK gun. And Bond's just like, hey, I like my Beretta. He's just like, yeah, the Beretta tends to lock up. You're going to use this gun from now on. I'm in charge here. And then, Bond even tries to sort of smuggle his Beretta out of the office, and he can't get anything past this M. He's just like, wait, put her down on my desk. Leave it there.
I was talking with Eric earlier about this movie, but I think there's only one gadget in the entire movie, and it's the communications rig that Strangeways uses to contact MI6. Bond has a gun that he realistically is shown cleaning after being in water, and nothing else. Just him and his quick thinking.
So for this movie, there weren't too many gadgets. I noticed that. But I have to say I loved the cyanide cigarette because it was unexpected. As much as they smoke in these movies, it was just kind of funny for him to pull it out and kill himself because he didn't trust himself not to tell the deep, dark secrets of Crab Key.
But you could also argue that the portable Geiger counter is technically the first Bond gadget.
The whole movie is a shorthand for what was going on culturally at the time. This happens with the other movies as well, so here's some things that would stand out in this one. Bond orders a Geiger counter from HQ. Doesn't describe what's going on because it was assumed the movie-going public would understand right away. The bad guy's plan isn't actually to find it all, disrupt rockets for Canaveral for reasons. But again, space was huge in the 1960s, so shoehorning in America's space program was basically the producer's way to attract the American populace to the Bond story.
So Bond is sent off to investigate what happened in Jamaica. Why one of their agents has gone missing.
One part of the world of Bond that does exist in this movie right off the bat is Felix Leiter. We don't know it's him when we first see him. He's just kind of this mysterious guy in really big sunglasses hanging out in the airport keeping an eye on Bond. We see him a couple times over the first half hour or so of the movie, and then eventually we get introduced to him where he takes Bond's gun from him and says something about oh, did you get measured for this? And Bond says something back that I assume it's either just spy lingo or it's some specific code word that MI6 and the CIA have set up to let their agents identify each other. And then they realize, oh, we're fighting the same war. And then for the whole rest of the movie, Felix Leiter is just this kind of the backup character to help Bond out. It's really cool that he's here right off the bat because Felix will be recurring throughout the franchise.
I liked Felix better than Quarrel. I think Quarrel was more of a stereotype, not necessarily a yes master type thing, but I think having Felix on the island would have worked out better overall. It'd be like 007 and 003 situation, two actual trained operatives. Also, side note, your secret mission is you're wearing civilian clothes, including a bright red shirt? Couldn't have thought of anything better. Felix's first appearance is at least believable, him playing the undercover CIA agent. They have contacts and money.
So we get the nice little scene at the airport when he arrives, and we get this nice, circle of intrigue going on where someone's come to collect him, and he's just like, okay, goes off to the phone. Rings up to his office, did you send someone to collect me? I thought I was supposed to be low-key. I'm like, no, didn't send anyone. So, Bond knows something's up already. But he decides to get in the car anyway. Go Bond. And then, then we get one of those famous 1960s car scenes where they're just bouncing up and down in a car seat while the background moves along behind them. I love those.
I think that because there's less gadgets in this movie, we get more of Bond doing kind of low-tech, hands-on spy stuff. And one of those elements comes up while he's getting ready to go to bed for the night and wants to make sure... Actually, I think he's getting ready to go out, but he wants to make sure that his room is secure. So he kind of locks the door, he checks around for wires, that kind of thing. He puts some powder on his briefcase so that he'll be able to see if anybody's opened up his briefcase while he's gone. And then he plucks out a single hair and pushes it across the opening in the closet. So that if somebody will come along and open that closet door, the hair's going to fall down and he'll know that someone was there. I remember my older brother having to explain this to me when I watched this on TV as a kid, because I didn't know what he was doing, and my brother had to explain how that worked to me, and I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. And then I remember trying to do that over and over again in my childhood. I would be like, oh, I want to see if like somebody's coming and checking my room, so I'd put a hair on the door, and then I would come home and forget about it, and inevitably I'd open the door and then go, oh shoot, I forgot to check for that hair to see. So I'm saying I would be a terrible spy.
Technically, the movie has terrible pacing and feels stretched out for long scenes. I may be biased coming from a world where music video directors do a lot of quick edits and action-type scenes even for non-dynamic moments, but there's several, oh my god, this scene is still going on moments.
Now, this is the bit where Bond is kind of just exploring around his hotel room, and man, his trousers are really high up. Like, they're coming right up above his belly button. Like, they are so high.
Bond sitting around, the shower scene could have been cut by a minute or two. I know this is how movies were back in the day, but it's a very, very, very long movie for what it actually is.
I genuinely love the music in this film. It's just so good. I love all this sort of like little sort of Jamaican hints to all the tunes and everything, and it's all it just feels like Jamaica in the 60s. I don't know what Jamaica was like in the 60s. I wasn't there. I've been there once in the 2000s. But yeah.
Now this is the one where everybody sings underneath the coconut tree, me honey and me. Wait, no, it's mango tree. Dang it!
Just love it, and that song always pops into my head when Bond finally arrives in Jamaica to smoke his death sticks.
Another great Bond being Bond sequence is where he catches the secretary spying on him and realizes, oh, she's totally got some information she's not sharing with me. So what does he do? He asks her out on a date. And she's like, oh, what should I do if a strange man asks me out? And he's like, you should say yes. And she's like, I'll say maybe. And he's like, all right, maybe then.
Oh, now, yeah. The Asian seduction where Bond tricks the woman working for the bad guys into sleeping with him for more information.
And a white British actress playing a Chinese woman for some reason.
Watching his back, not too fond of this scene. What he does, he probably shouldn't do that. But he's doing what he can. He's doing everything he can for his country. But yeah, well, it's just the bit that really gets me is like when she says to him, what should I say when I get an invitation from a gentleman? And he goes, you should say yes. It's like, no. You should say no, and maybe swipe right or left, or whichever way you do it on those weird apps these days.
And she calls him up and is like, hey, you should totally come up into the mountains and have sex with me. And he's like, I'll be right there.
You've got the first Bond car.
When it comes to my favorite car for this movie, I will say that I won't be able to name off the different car models like my husband Justin will be able to.
I like the little Sunbeam Alpine James tooled around in on Jamaica. No gadgets, just driving.
But the one that stood out to me the most would be the hearse. I couldn't tell if it was like a really fancy limo or just a very pimped out hearse. So that one would be my favorite because I was confused the whole entire time, even till it pummeled off the side of the cliff.
And then as he's driving up there, car chase happens.
You've got the first Bond car chase.
That scene was shot with a rear projection screen for the chase, quote unquote.
Now what's great about this car chase is that Bond's just driving along, and then you start to hear the music going dun 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 dun, and you're like, oh man, something's gonna happen here. And then another car pulls out and starts chasing him, and the music just goes away completely. There's zero soundtrack to the car chase, which is a little odd. But this car chase, it's pretty intense. It's obviously a lot of rear projection. Like watching it today, you're like, okay, nothing about this looks real. But at the time, it would have been pretty cool.
Which was funny because the chase hearse was about 4 times larger than it should be. They actually did the same technique for the fish in Dr. Noselayer, but at least they had a throwaway line about convex windows or something.
One of the things I really like about it is while it is rear projection, Bond is actually keeping his eyes on the road, which is nice to see because so often in old movies where people are driving, they're not looking at the road at all. But Sean Connery here, he's got his eyes on the road. And ultimately he sends the other car careening off a cliff and gets out of his car and is looking down at it, and some other guy comes up and he's like, oh my god, what happened? And he looks at me and goes, I think they were on their way to a funeral.
I love the point where the hearse falls off the road and he had some quippy one-liner like, oh, I think they were all going to a funeral anyways.
This is dumb. This is dumb, Bond. This is not a good one-liner. I think they were on their way to a funeral because they died. Do you get it?
So that made me smile knowing that that's a James Bond thing.
So then he goes to the girl's house, and she's all surprised he's there, because she's like, sure, those guys are supposed to kill him while he's on the way up here. How'd he get here? And Bond's like, oh, I just came to have sex with you. And she's like, oh, yeah, okay. Because she's like, all right, I'm going to make a phone call to an assassin to come kill him, but I'll keep him here for a couple hours. But Bond knows she's evil, right? Like, he's totally aware that she's evil. He has sex with her. And then he's like, oh, I've called a taxi. And then he goes out and shoves her in the car, and it's not a taxi. It's the police arresting her. And then he goes inside and sets himself up with some music going and a deck of cards and plays solitaire until the assassin shows up. And who's the assassin? Evil Geologist. Now, one of the first real villainous characters we meet in Dr. No is not Dr. No himself. Instead, it's an evil geologist. Bond goes to this guy because the agent that was murdered on the island that he's investigating took some rock samples to this geologist. So Bond goes and meets him and finds out that he's like, oh no, those rock samples were totally ordinary. But Bond's done some investigating with a Geiger counter, his other gadget of this movie, and finds out that, oh, they were radioactive samples. And then we get the geologist hop in a boat to Crab Key, and the guy he's getting a boat from is like, you know, we're not supposed to go there during the day. And he's like, it's all right, I'll take responsibility. And he goes to Crab Key Island, and he walks into this room that is just burned into my memory. It's this big open room with a chair way off in the corner and a big grate overhead.
This henchman walks into a large, round Art Deco room. It's got this really cool shadow effect going on.
He sits down in the chair, and then a voice comes over the loudspeaker, and it's Dr. No's voice. And he's like, what the hell are you doing here? And he's like, oh, this guy's investigating. He's like, well, you better deal with it. He's like, yeah, I'm trying to deal with it.
Where Dr. No's, he's speaking to him over an intercom.
He's like, listen, there's a table over in the corner. What? We just saw this room. There was no table in the corner. Was that table there the whole time and just out of frame, or did it levitate up out of the floor? In any case, there's a big spider on it.
And orders him to assassinate Bond with a tarantula.
The scene with the spider.
I'm going to just have to assume that this is a super aggressive, genetically engineered tarantula with enhanced venom or something, because as far as I'm aware, most tarantulas aren't all that aggressive or poisonous.
Oh my god, that's so good.
My wife was in the room while I was watching this for this recording, and my wife hates spiders. And so when it got to this part, I was just like, hey, you best close your eyes, because what happens is the evil geologist puts that spider into Bond's room, and it crawls across Bond's shoulder. It's a real big spider. Now, from what I understand, this spider is not actually a dangerous spider, but it's a real big spider, and it's real creepy.
And I think it probably contributes to the reason why I'm still scared of spiders to this day. you know, I'm a father of two. But and I have to deal with all the spiders in the house. I'll happily pick them up in my hand and throw them out the window. But they still make the skin crawl. And I'm pretty sure it all comes down to this scene where he's lying in the bed and the spider is climbing up his arm. He's just like staring at it, just giving it the eye, just like, you wait, Mr. Spider. And then the moment it just creeps off of his arm, he's up, throws his pillow to the other side of the room, runs around with his shoe and just starts smacking it. And I love again the music cues in this, where it's like every time he hits it with a shoe there's a huge dun 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 and it goes perfectly in time with the really dramatic music that was just happening before. It's just like I love it. It seems like such a cheesy thing today, but it was just, yeah, as a kid watching this, loved it.
In the book, however, I've read this book before. It was years ago, but from what I remember, it wasn't a spider they used here. It was centipedes or millipedes. I think it was millipedes, and like big ones. And honestly, that's more creepy to me than a big spider. And also, I'm pretty sure that was the inspiration for how they tried to assassinate Padme in Episode 2 of the Star Wars franchise.
This scene's also great, though, because it's one of the many times where the villain could just shoot Bond, but instead, of course, they have to come up with some elaborate death trap.
The kill of Professor Dent is probably my favorite kill of the movie. Few things going for it. Bond sets a trap, pours a few drinks, and for the actual second time in the movie, doesn't drink it, and then gets out a pack of playing cards to kill the time, assuming it's about an hour or two. I mean, that's thinking ahead there, Bond. But the kicker is when he counts the shots from the guy's weapon, and knowing what he was shooting. If you're watching of Archer, that's one of his superpowers. I guess that's just one more thing that Archer took from this series.
As Bond's talking to the geologist, trying to find out what the plan is, the geologist keeps inching his gun closer and closer to him because he's dropped on the floor, but it's on a blanket, so he's like scooting it closer and closer. And then he picks it up and tries to fire at Bond. Click, click, click. Nothing happens. Bond goes, "This is Smith & Wesson, and you've had your 6." And then he shoots him like 6 times. Dang, Bond, that's cold.
The cold-blooded kill after telling Dent he failed. That's something that was repeated later on in Casino Royale.
You've got the first Bond girl.
Oh, the lady coming out of the water in her bikini.
Eventually, with the help of Quirrell, he makes it out to Crab Key Island, and there we meet the Bond girl of the movie, Honey Ryder.
For me, my favorite love interest or henchman has to be love interest. There's something about Honey Ryder that's just really superfluous to the plot of the movie, but is just so very James Bond to have her in there.
Ursula Andress playing Honey Ryder in her famous bikini, with an honorable mention to Sylvia Trench.
Honey Ryder is literally the quintessential Bond girl.
Is a blonde chick in a bikini just hanging out on an island collecting seashells.
Oh.
In fact, I think it became a trope for strong female to go up against Bond because of how useless Honey is.
Her dad was a marine biologist. She educated herself with an encyclopedia. I think she's up to the T's. That's a weird way to educate yourself. And she's just kind of along for the ride here.
Oh, to this day. Oh. Yeah.
Before the girl power movement and then being able to fight back like the woman later in the series, she was just hot and useless.
I don't want to be one of these like disgusting pervy people, but she is one good looking lady. She looks good in that bikini.
Later Bond girls would help with the plot in some way a lot of the times. Honey Ryder, she doesn't. She's just here.
And then she starts holding up her shells that she's been getting out of the thing and just waving them in front of her boobs. It's like, this scene is only suggesting one thing. And she's a very, very good looking girl.
Anyone who could tuck a shirt into a bikini and wear a belt as an outfit really should get accolades. It's kind of like the mullet of clothing. Business on top, party on bottom. I get it. It's very James Bond.
That's fine, I guess. But she's just... If I could change one thing about this movie, I would give Honey Ryder something to do to help. Have her be familiar with the streams that they use to hide from the villains as they're making their way through Dr. No's island. Or just... She doesn't... I don't feel like she contributes. And that's a shame.
Oh, that dragon tank is hilarious.
Let's talk about dragons, shall we? That's right, dragons. Now, I know in context of the story, Dr. No has, convinced people that there's a dragon on the island as another sort of weird security layer to stop people investigating the island. And the old yokels seem to think that there is a dragon on the islands because the bloke who keeps giving Bond little tours on his boat keeps telling him so. It's like, yeah, there are dragons here. It's like, no, there's no dragons. And then we see the dragon. And yes, this thing looks nothing like a dragon. It just looks like a big, black, square cardboard box that shoots a flame out of one end. It's clearly two blokes walking around in a box with a flamethrower. It's not a dragon. If you saw that, you wouldn't be like, oh, it's a dragon. I'm going to go back to my village and tell everyone there's a dragon on the island. You'd go back and say, there's two blokes messing around with a flamethrower in a big box. Let's just not go there. You wouldn't be like, it's a dragon. It's not. It's clearly two men in a box.
There are no real henchmen in this movie either. All the people willing to kill themselves for Dr. No, really, Spectre, is interesting. They definitely lean more into the ruthlessness in the next movie, but there were no standout henchman roles.
So I don't have too much of a favorite kill, but I would say it's a moment where they should have been killed. It was, they're on Crab Key. They're in the water. The actor who plays Quirrell is wearing a bright red shirt, and they're all just breathing out of bamboo stalks, which I'm very familiar with because we have a ton in our backyard. And it takes forever to chop those things down. In the 5 seconds they had to hide in crystal clear water, there's no way they would have been able to fashion such fancy snorkel equipment. So that's why I count it as a kill, because as an observer watching it, they really should have been dead at the end of that scene. But it's James Bond, so they continue.
You've got the first Bond villain.
They evade capture for a while, but eventually they've got to end up in the bad guy's lair, right?
So we've got Dr. No, a sinister and mysterious evil genius with metal mechanical hands, hiding out in a high-tech lair in the Caribbean, plotting world domination by manipulating NASA's rockets.
You got to have a scene where Dr. No tells Bond what his evil plan is. And the way that comes about is that they get captured and they get brought into like a decontamination area. It's very industrial, getting scrubbed down and stuff. And then suddenly they wander into like a palatial 5-star resort with like big fluffy bathrobes and fresh clothes for them in their sizes and breakfast on a platter. And it's all cushy and nice. And Bond's like, well, we may as well eat, because I'm hungry. And then they drink the coffee and immediately pass out because, it was drugged.
I really like Dr. No's style. Clothes, his dinnerware, he's got this massive collection of artifacts. He's got this huge aquarium. Just the whole sci-fi futurism angle he's going for. I love his interior decorator.
And so Dr. No's plan is, we won't murder them. Instead, we'll capture them. We'll bring them into our palatial resort rooms. Then we'll drug them. Then when they wake up, we'll bring them to dinner. I'm going to invite Bond to be a bad guy. And then when he says no, I'm going to put him in a tiny little terrible cell. So I guess all the 5-star resort stuff was a way to try to like convince Bond to go along with being evil. Because that's kind of all Dr. No's after with him here. But then when he says no, why don't they just shoot him in the head, you know? This is a common issue with Bond villains, is they don't know how to get rid of the baddies. Or rather, the Bond villains don't know how to get rid of Bond. Instead, they just put him in a cell, and of course he breaks out.
You know, sounds pretty stereotypical of a Bond villain. But you got to remember, this is the first. This is trend-setting.
I do love, though, that when Dr. No's explaining who he is and what he's doing, he's part of Spectre. Spectre's here right from the beginning in the Bond franchise. Dr. No explains that, you know, he's a genius. He tried to work for the Americans. He tried to work for the governments in the East. Nobody would take his advice, so he's decided, fine, I'm just going to join this crime lord family. Well, not family, this crime lord organization, and use my evil genius for that. And he tries to get Bond to join, too, but Bond's not having it.
I think my favorite line in the film is when Dr. No, he's captured Bond, and he invites him to dinner, and he just explains his plan. He just kind of monologues for a bit. And at one point, he says, east, west, just points of the compass, each as stupid as the other.
Side note, I loaded up the trailer to show my wife, and it's just terribly hilarious. It's like 2 minutes long, gives away the entire plot, including the villain reveal and the escape at the end. I guess this is just the way trailers back were in 1962?
Of course, Bond ends up breaking out. Dr. No's plot is to steal a missile somehow using radio waves or something, but there's also a nuclear reactor, and Bond makes the reactor go critical in order to break up the plan. Dr. No comes up and starts trying to fight him over the reactor, and they end up having a fist fight on top of the like cooling bath for the nuclear core, which is a super cool setting to have a fist fight in. And Dr. No ends up taking a bath in that nuclear bath, and he dead now, so that's too bad.
I think one of the coolest kills in the movie is towards the end, when Bond's in this like containment suit, and he punches one of Dr. No's henchmen off of a railing and into the boiling radioactive pool. I think they even threw in a Wilhelm scream or something similar.
Now, I talked about how Honey Ryder didn't really do much for the movie. Once Bond's defeated the bad guy, like, there's alarms blaring and stuff because, like, the nuclear reactor on this island's going critical, and Bond has to run around the facility looking for Honey Ryder, and he eventually finds her. Okay. She, when they went to dinner, was wearing pink pants and a kimono top. And when he finds her, she's chained to a floor, a sloped floor, next to a water that I guess like is the ocean, and as the tide comes in, it's gonna come up and drown her because she's chained to the slope floor. Like, Honey gets the like overly complicated death trap in this movie that Bond really deserved, and instead it goes to her. So I guess that's the one thing she contributes, is almost getting murdered in an unnecessarily complicated way. But the really weird thing is she doesn't have her pants on anymore, and like I don't want to get into why. She's still got like, it looks like the kimono top maybe had like a bathing suit. I don't know. She's got something on, but she was wearing pink pants, and those pink pants are gone, and that's weird. But Bond saves her, and they escape on a boat.
I vaguely remember like almost the island completely blowing up at the very end, and then Bond escaping on a boat. That's pretty much it. But yeah, just, wow, what can I say?
Sailing out in the ocean. They don't have any fuel left. What are we going to do? Felix Ryder shows up, and he's like, oh, we'll tow you back into shore. And Bond's like, great, that's fantastic, Felix, thanks. And then Honey starts kissing on him. So what does Bond do? He lets the tow line go, because this movie ends with Bond and a girl in a boat about to have sex in the middle of the ocean with no way to get home. The end?
I don't say I would change anything about this film. Seeing it for the first time and it being the first James Bond, it really makes some of the ones I have seen click, so I really enjoyed that. Also, I can see the inspiration for Austin Powers and Dr. Evil and all that stuff, so that was kind of a fun moment, kind of seeing where they got all of their set design and other stuff from. Justin says there's a lot more other tie-ins to where Austin Powers got all of their creativity from in future movies, so I'm excited to see that.
Overall, this movie is okay. I'm actually surprised that they went ahead with more Bond movies after this. It did apparently turn a decent enough profit. I always think the next Bond movie in the series, From Russia with Love, was a better overall spy flick in general. But I guess Dr. No has to stay.
Well, it's unfortunate that the movie doesn't really age all that well, especially in its depictions of women and minorities, especially with white actors portraying Asian characters. Looking back on it, though, you can tell that we as a society have come a long way.
I loved this movie, more so because it starts everything for me, and I'm kind of excited to see the different James Bonds as they progress, as the technology progresses, because 1960, wow. Just how archaic some of the car chases and special effects could be. But I really enjoyed it because it's a classic. So, thanks for including me.
That said, with the context of its time, Dr. No is a really well-made film, and overall a solid intro to the British super spy.
Yeah, Dr. No, it establishes Bond in a way. You know, there had been a few Bond bits before this, like audio dramas and I think there was a really old TV version of Casino Royale, but this really establishes the Bond that we know today. And it kind of doesn't even have all of the Bond tropes that we know and love, but they're slowly coming. They're slowly coming. And we'll get a lot more in the next episode, From Russia with Love.
Podcasters Assemble Season 003 is a production of the We Can Make This Work Probably podcast network. Find more of our shows at probablywork.com and learn how to contribute to future episodes of Podcasters Assemble by looking us up on Twitter at Casters Assemble or joining our Discord server, link in the show notes. Submissions are always open. Thank you to everyone who was able to contribute to this episode. Be sure to check the show notes for links where you can find them all online. Thank you.
This has been a presentation
of the We Can Make This Work
Probably Network.
Follow us on Twitter
At Probably Work.
For more of our questionable content.
Also, we have a website called probablywork.com.
Click, click, click. Nothing happens. Bond goes, that's a Smith and... Nope. Let me try that again. Bond goes, that's a Smith and Wesson. I can't do a Bond voice here. That's a Smith and Wesson. I can't think of how he says Smith. Smith? Smith. That's a Smith & Wesson.
Oh, Jamaica. Kingston, Jamaica. Just always makes me think of this lovely song by Harry Belafonte. Down the way where the nights are gay and the sun shines daily on the mountain top. I took a trip on a sailing ship, and when I reached Jamaica I made a stop. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way. I won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town. Down in the market you can hear the ladies cry out, while on their heads they bear ackee rice, and salt fish are nice, and the rum is fine any time of year. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way. I won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston down. And I could go on, but I just absolutely love that song. And every time I watch this movie, even though this song is not in this movie, the song gets stuck in my head.